There's a letter to the editor in Tuesday's Star Tribune. I'm going to read just a brief portion of it. If both parties have their fists up, how do we expect the fight to stop? If we really want to affect change, our actions should be the embodiment of the results we wish to attain. Did you get that? If we really want to affect change, our actions should be the embodiment of the results we wish to attain. What a concept, huh? That if I want something to happen, I need to live it for it to happen and not expect other people to do it, not wait for others to lead the way. So, what do I want? What do you want to happen? How do you want this world to be? We say we want peace. We want justice. We want fairness. We want opportunity. We want security. We want all of those things. We want goodness. Does our behavior, do our lives speak that? I ask this with a confession. My phone number fell into the hands of people who usually would not be contacting me for anything in this political season, okay? And so 9 different numbers texted me asking me a question on this survey, which was a skewed question, or asking me for help on this campaign, or this person needs your help, or this. 9 different numbers over the last week and a half. And I started out really being quite decent and asking, okay, what's behind this? What do you want from me, and why do you want this? One of the questions had to do with the handling of the situation, the riots in the Twin Cities, and I asked, well, what are you looking for? Because this is what I think. And I gave a long, detailed answer, and then said, would you respond to me? Which, of course, they never do. And I'm not, maybe I am stupid enough to think that maybe somebody will. They never do. And I think that's rude. If you reach out to me, if you have my phone number and you text me and you ask me for something, then you should have the decency to respond when I ask for some clarification or more detail. So one of the last ones that I responded to was something like this. This is Sam, and I'm reaching out on behalf of Peter the Patriot, and he needs your help in his election battle against that corrupt clown who's on the other side. Can you help him? Please text this number with your contribution immediately. And my comeback was, take a hike, Sam, and take Pete with you. I wouldn't vote for him to inspect the sewers. I don't think he's, and I went on, and I said, I would like a response. Come back to me on this. What do you think of that? Nothing. Apparently, I wanted to fight. I wanted to argue. I wanted something, some enlightened, some involved interaction, something. Got nothing. So what's this got to do with Moses and the king of Egypt? That's a good question, Susan. Thank you for asking. Let's see if it has anything to do with it or not. The text today from Exodus is an identity story for the Jewish people. And it was probably put in some written form in a collection during the Babylonian exile about 560 BCE, somewhere in there. So the sort of finalized version of the story, or collected version of the story, the written version of the story, would come about 1,000 years or somewhere later than the event itself. So it comes down through time, and it's told again and again and again. And you know the story to some extent. That for the Hebrew people, it goes like this. We were an enslaved people doing hard time in Egypt, hard labor. And we were there for generation after generation. But God, you see, had taken special interest in us a long time before. And so finally, God decides it's time to spring us, to set us free. So God sends people to the king to convince the king to let us go. But Pharaoh, the king, is not easily convinced because he really likes the free labor that slaves provide. Our nation liked that too for a time, and found out that slave labor is very expensive. And we're still learning that slave labor and slavery is very expensive. We're still paying for that. So every time Moses and Aaron approached the Pharaoh and asked him to let people go, he would say yes, and then he would back off and something terrible would happen. So there was hail, and there was locusts, and there was flies, and there was frogs, and just all kinds of bad stuff. Until finally, the worst thing, it cost Pharaoh the life of his own son. And so you heard that in the reading today, where God says to Moses and Aaron, you tell the people to be ready. Get ready to go. And you're going to slaughter these lambs, and you're going to eat them. But before you do, you're going to smear blood on the doorposts of your houses, so that when I come to kill all the firstborn animals and people in Egypt, I'll know where you live, and I won't kill your children, I'll just kill their children. Because that will bring freedom. And generation after generation will remember this and celebrate this, because this is the Passover story, which is a fundamental identity story for the Jewish people. It's also part of our identity as the people of Jesus, who himself was a Jew. Now, we all have collections of stories that help us define ourselves. Stories that we rehearse and retell. Stories that we tell as families. Stories that we tell with friends. Remember when you did that? Remember when we did this? All of those stories about accomplishments and failures and relationships and times together and success and brokenness and joy and sorrow, all of those things, we all have a collection within ourselves that help us maintain our sense of ourself. We also have God stories that we rehearse that tell us who God is and what God is like. The story today, if we're honest with ourselves, speaks of a tribal God. A God who is not with and for everyone, but who is only with and for us, our tribe, our people, our nation. And this tribal God in this story is brutal, is murderous, is a baby killer. And this story is about identity and our connection with this God who is our God, not their God, our tribal God, the God who's on our side, who loves us and cares for us, not for them, not for anybody else. Think of America first. Think of a president standing in front of a church that he doesn't attend, holding up a Bible that he doesn't read. You have that very thing there. The religious mythology around us as a nation, as God's people. It's the same thing. It's the very same thing. Now, is that the God that you and I meet in Jesus? Now, Jesus is a Jew. The Passover story is part of his identity. He knows it well. But as a mature adult, he takes this story of faith, takes it into himself and repurposes it, reframes it, which we're all called to do to become mature people of faith. Take the stories, make them your own. And so he takes that story. And what does he do with it? We're told that on the night before he dies, he sits down with his friends to eat the Passover meal, and they tell that story about getting out of Egypt and the death of the firstborn and God killing the firstborn of Egypt. And during the meal, we are told Jesus takes a piece of bread and he blesses the bread and he breaks it and he gives it to his friends and he says, "This is my body given." Later, he takes a cup of wine and he gives thanks for this wine. and he passes it to them, and he says, "This is my blood, my life poured out for you." Not life-taking, but life-giving. Not getting more for me, but giving myself over. This is the way of God. And my understanding is that table, that event at the table, what Jesus intends is for everyone to find their place at that table, for everyone to come and realize they belong. We all belong together in this life. We're called out of our small, scared, divided lives into this larger life that we're all a part of, that is ever larger, ever fuller, ever more complete, ever more inclusive. Is that what we want? Is that what we want for our world? Does our behavior speak that? There's a party at this house. Parents aren't home. And there's alcohol and there's other things. And this particular young woman has a little too much to drink. And it may be that somebody put something in her drink, because that happens, sadly. And she is taken off by herself and she's sexually assaulted. And the one who takes her away is the star of the hockey team. And the young woman who is assaulted is the daughter of the hockey coach. Well, this is in a community that is economically depressed, they're anxious, they're isolated, they are up against it. And this hockey player is the star, and he is the best they have ever seen. And if he plays his cards right, he will go to the NHL and he will put that community on the map. So when this event happens and it is reported, and then the names of those involved come out, the community takes sides. And you can imagine the things that are said and how that happens, as it often does. A large percentage of the community sides with the hockey player, that she lured him into this. She tricked him somehow. She wanted to be with him. We know that. And he wouldn't be with her. And so now she trapped him, and she's going to ruin him. His whole life, his whole future is on the line here. We have to defend him. But in this case, there were 3 young men, 2 of them hockey players, 3 friends, who hear the screams. And they come and they intervene in the assault and they stop it, and they speak up and they stand up with and for this young woman over against their teammate and teammates. Well, the community comes apart. The team comes apart. The coach is fired. His family is harassed. His daughter is harassed. All kinds of ugly, even violent things happen as a result. The story is about loyalties. What we give ourselves to, what we get behind, and what we will then do to protect those things, whatever they are, if it's a sport, if it's a team, if it's a family, if it's an event, if it's our way of life. What will we do? How extreme will we become in order to save that thing and stay loyal to that thing and preserve it? Well, it's the central story in a novel, and the novel is appropriately titled Us Against You. It could be subtitled Little Loyalties, or How Big Is Your God, or Who Is Your God? Seems to me it's a good story for this political season as things heat up and as the divisions deepen and harden. We know we're going to have differences. We know we already do, and we hear them all the time. And there's a lot more heat than light around them. Can we have our differences without demonizing each other? Can we speak to each other and listen to each other without becoming small? and without shrinking God down to our size and our side. And regarding our loyalties, the positions that we take, the things that we glom onto and hold on for dear life, let us ask ourselves, are those things life-giving, life-enhancing? Are they freeing, liberating, inclusive, open? Do they speak of a table which is central for us, which was central for Jesus, a table where everybody has a place, everybody is welcome, but you come to the table, you're expected to behave like you belong at the table? Do they speak of that sort of thing, or are they small, exclusive, mean, scared, greedy, cruel, cold? Are they for everyone or for a select few? The Passover story is about liberation, and that's a wonderful thing, but it has a very dark side to it. Our national story is about freedom, and it's a wonderful story, but it has deep darkness in it. Are we willing to face those things? Are we willing to talk about those things, to deal with those without demonizing, without running away, without condemning, without pointing the finger? In the novel, towards the end, there's a terrible accident that happens, and it wakes people up. It yanks them out of their separate places, and it pulls them together because they are still people of compassion, and they understand that those who are hurt by this need them to gather around. But the author says they also know it's temporary, that the divisions, the tribalism, and all the ugliness that accompanies those things, that will all come back. Does it have to? And when and if it comes, can we call it out? Can we name it and not allow it to take possession of us? Because it often does. What do we want, really? When we do our own self-examination, when we go to our own hearts, what do we really want? I can't count the number of times I heard a candidate for political office say, "Vote for me, send me to wherever it is, and I'll fight for you." Do we want to fight? Or is it time for something better than that? The letter to the editor I began with, I'm going to end with, I'm going to read you the whole thing. It's not long. The first part goes like this. As a former member of a white National Socialist organization, and now an openly gay man, I can say the following. Violence and criminal acts should never be used nor encouraged to further a cause or agenda. I am in prison, and there are a great many others who are in here as well, for doing just that, using acts of violence to further our cause or purpose or whatever you may wish to call it, and we are paying for it. If both parties have their fists up, how do we expect the fight to stop? If we really want to affect change, our actions should be the embodiment of the results we wish to attain. The name is Jordan Blevins, Moose Lake, Minnesota. I would like to meet Jordan. I would like to hear more of what Jordan has to say. And I think maybe if Jordan ran for office, I might vote for him. How about you? Peace.